In this video, we're going to discuss the EZGUI Visual Designer and the different options that are available from the main menus. We'll go through this very briefly. For example, the File menu, you have your standard New Project, Open Project, Save, Close Project. You can select a previous project. It'll list the last 8 previous projects that you worked on. And then there's 2 dialogues that can be displayed. The Editor Options dialog allows you to select your external code editor. To do that, you can just click on this little arrow button here, go to the folder where your code editor is. In this case, we're going to use Jellyfish Pro. It's a freeware code editor, and it sets the path. And also, you want to make sure you have Use Smart Parser option checked. That's default, and it's recommended. Just click Apply, and now you have an external code editor. To see how that works, we'll just close a form here. On the project palette window, we'll click the Generate Application icon, and automatically we generate source code for our project, and we're in the Jellyfish code editor. And you can add code in certain sections of it that is for your events, for your forms, and your controls. And when you close that out, you're back in the designer. Back to the File menu. Designer options. This dialog allows you to select a number of options, such as the default colors for the drag handles when you're designing your controls. There's a lock position and unlock for drag handles, so you can set what colors you want to use for it. You can also determine whether or not you want the designer to maximize when you first start it up. In another video, we mentioned that each project has a built-in palette. There's also a pattern library that can be loaded in for 3D patterns for background colors. Instead of using a solid color, you can use a 3D pattern, and you can create your own and load them in here, and then any project can use them. Display Verify dialog. What that does is when you delete a control, it determines whether or not you want a verify dialog displayed to say yes or no whether or not you actually want to delete a control. Grid type. It controls how the grid is displayed. The snap to grid on forms when it's turned on. Code templates. You can actually create your own code templates for special code to be added to the generated code using a template. And then you can select the 4 default fonts that are available to all controls in your project. So we're going to just click Apply there. The Form menu basically has basic options for editing a form, setting the grid for resizing of a form, saving a form. You can save forms as templates, which means they can be used later on as a template for new forms and other projects. Then you can not only add a form that you've already created, such an existing form, you can add a new blank form, and even import Visual Basic forms. And the Visual Basic importing feature, it's minimal, but it will import most of your Visual Basic form. At least it gets you started in importing projects to work with EZGUI and PowerBasic. I'm going to display a form here so we can see the Controls menu. Controls menu is a way to select which type of control you want to draw. You can also select that option over in the Controls tab on the Project Palette window by simply selecting the control type here. And that's the same thing. Toolbar. Forms can only have one regular toolbar. They can have a thing called a toolbar strip control, which is a little bit different, and have multiple controls, which are those type of embedded toolbars. But the form toolbar, there can only be one, and so you can add it and edit it here. You have a test mode and edit mode. You can change the grid settings for your snap to grid. For example, let's draw a control. I'll change the grid to 16 by 16 pixels. So you can see what I'm doing. I'll display the grid. Now you can't see that grid too well, so I'm going to go over to the Designer Options menu, and I want it to show lines instead of dots. So now you can see your grid. And so you notice how it moves controls based to that grid, and it sizes them based on the grid. And you can change the grid and even have custom settings for the grid. So for one, I can turn that grid off and set it to a more better options, such as, for example, 4x4 pixels and so forth. So now you have your snap to grid settings for working with your projects. Group menu, that's for working with controls as groups on a form. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of controls here. I'm going to copy a few controls so I have more than one on here. And so let's say I want to line these controls up to this control here. I can hold the control key down, select the others, go to the group menu, and I can say left align. Now they're all aligned to that control there. And there's a number of other options from the group menu, such as setting not only its alignment, but even centering controls based on the first control, even spacing the controls as a group. You can even have plugins for group alignment. You can write your own plugins using Power Basic and save them as DLLs. Also, there's an option here for the drag option. Normally, when you work with a form, you can't draw a drag rectangle to surround controls. You can just select one control or multiple controls using the control key, like this. So if you want to select controls using a drag rectangle, you have a number of options. You can just say select all, and they're automatically all selected. You can say select by drag, and only the controls that intersect the drag rectangle are selected. Or you can say select by drag inside, and only the controls which are inside the drag rectangle are selected. Notice the bottom control is not inside it. It won't be selected. So you can select controls as groups using this option here. And so I'm going to select a number of controls, and then now I can drag them and move them around. Default fonts. EZGUI is a runtime engine, and it has 6 default fonts built in. System fonts, System Fixed, ANSI Variable Width, ANSI Fixed, Microsoft Sans Serif, and the OEM Terminal font. These fonts are always available. But you can have the designer, or even at a project level, select 4 custom fonts available for your controls. So for example, these two here are project level default fonts, but I also selected 2 in the project properties dialog, and they're available here. Now you can even select a custom font and have it available there, or even have it set up just to use this system default font. What this affects is when you create a new control, for example, I'm going to select Arial 12V, V, which is basically bold and variable width. So when I create a new button control, it used that default font that I have selected here. And when I double click a control and get the properties dialog, you'll notice there's a button for each one of the default fonts. And you can just move over and they'll show you a little tooltip showing you what the current default font is for that number. So this makes it easy to work with groups of fonts and just changing a font throughout your application and always having a default font. For example, if I create a default font 9 and have a bunch of controls using that, I can later change it on the project level, and every control and every form that uses default font 9 will automatically be changed to that one font. So this is very useful in working with large projects where you want to change fonts in a large scale. If you need a custom font in a specific situation, you can still click on the font button and select a unique font for a particular control, so you're not limited to the default fonts. In this case, I selected a unique font for this control here. The Tools menu allows you to add a list of external tools, and basically what they are is just a external application. For example, I'll display the dialog. I can put a description, which will be in the menu. I can show what file name or exe file to run, and it'll run that application. So if you have an external graphic editor or whatever that you want to be able to run from the designer, you can add them to the Tools menu from this dialog here. The Windows menu, again, it has a number of options here. We'll just look at a couple of them. You can turn on the screen sizes template on and off, so it gives you an idea of, say you're working for designing applications for screens smaller than your development PC. You can set your templates on so you can see whether or not your forms are within the available size for that screen size. So there's a number of other sizes available than just the ones you see, because if you go to a larger screen, you'll see even more choices available. And then there's an option here, toggle status bar units. What that's for is the coordinate system in EZGUI is character-based. Character is basically the default size for the system font for a single character, its width and height, and the default normally in most PCs would be 8 by 16 characters. And so character units are used throughout EZGUI. But if you want to use pixels, you can toggle that and change it. And so if it's set up for pixels, you'll change it to units, and you can see it down here in the bottom here. It says units there, and also in the fast properties part of the screen here, you'll see that it says units. And if I change it again here and I toggle it again, now it's going to say pixels, and it'll say pixels over here in the fast properties screen there. And lastly, your help menu, keyboard shortcuts. You can display a dialog that will show you all the keyboard shortcuts that are available and working both in edit mode and test mode on forms. You can see the Visual Designer reference information, the complete EZGUI documentation, and then there's just an about dialog about EZGUI and what version it is and its copyright. Well, that's the basics with all the menus. Let's just look at the toolbar real quick. Here, when I have a form display, I have certain toolbar icons: save form as, close form, edit form properties. The edit form properties, I can double click a form in the white space, or I can click this icon here and I get the same thing. Reset form's position. If I move a form over here, I can reset the position back to the left. I can make it to the right. I can even center it. And so I have some options there. These two icons are for adding a new toolbar and editing the toolbar properties. This is edit mode, and this is test mode. If I click test mode, now I can actually test my dialogues, my forms, and then I'm back in edit mode. Reset tab order. Sometimes when you add new controls, they may not actually, they may have the defined tab order, Z order, or depth, but in the designer maybe they're not actually aligned correctly. You can just reset that if you need to. This is useful. If I, let's say I have a form and it's really large and I have a control over here, and I change the form, make it smaller, and I say, you know, I'm missing a control. I can go over to the control list, and while I can select that control, it's still not visible. So control button number 4 is not visible. So what I can do is I can check this option here, move next control to 0, 0, and then the next control I select will get moved to the 0, 0 position to bring it back in view. And so control gets lost somehow, you can easily bring it back to the 0, 0 position, and then you can move it again to where you need it. And then you have your bookmark features for the visual bookmark, which we discussed in another video. Here's the bookmark combo box. Again, your control list here, and then here's an autosave on or off indicator right here. So here's some of the basic features about the EZGUI Visual Designer and its menus and its main toolbar.